So there's a theory I have that people are pushed to work harder and harder. And so there is an existing theory that, like, how corporations would fight tooth and nail to not lower the 8 hour work day, even though there were lots of studies that showed that even a 6 hour workday, people were actually more productive because they were overworked with an 8 hour workday. And with a 6 hour workday, they had more rest and they were able to actually be more focused and work harder when they went into work. And so the the theory among a lot of people was that the reason for this is to basically steal your energy. Um, if people are given the time to self-reflect with themselves and like have a lot of deep internal thought and think about what makes them happy, like what they're doing with their life, what is the actual path that they're going on, then they're not going to play along with this game. And so you need to keep people distracted, for one, but then also it kind of plays into a cycle where when you get off a very long shift, you're exhausted, and then you're more likely to go buy go buy fast food. You're more likely to consume entertainment. You're more likely to buy things because basically you're you're tired and you don't have it's very hard to be disciplined when you're tired. You kind of just like, oh, I'm exhausted, I just want the easiest thing. And so that reigns very true, especially, but one could argue that like that is just how capitalist society progressed because it ultimately orientates towards corporations making money, right? But although I do think that that is one of the purposes that is like was already pre-planned out and was already created. And the thing about taking people's energy reigns true with me a lot as well. And so, like, a lot of people, when they get to the end of their lives and they finally are taking less time at work, or maybe they're retired, they sit back and they say to themselves, like, oh, like, what did I do this for? Or one of the regrets I had is if I could go back, I would work less. That's what like everyone says. It's like the stereotype, I feel like. And obviously, I'm not retired, so obviously I'm not in that position. But I'm sure you guys have heard it from everyone as well. Everyone who's older, they're like, "Oh, I would have spent more time with my family. I would have." And one could argue that if you took that person and you went back in time to when they were in the thick of it and they were working extremely hard and you were like, okay, just go to the woods, like, just you're dropping everything, you're dropping your phone, you're dropping work, and you're going to go to the woods, and you're essentially going to fast, so you're not going to have anything to do, you're not going to be eating. And I bet you that person comes out of the woods and they have a totally different perspective on life. And that the reason for that is because you finally have the time where you're able to sit down with yourself, have this deep internal thought, and basically figure out like yourself, figure out what you want, figure out what you like. And so I think that's a very interesting thing. But one specific thing that seems different about this system to me is that it seems like people are worked harder and harder. It seems like people are worked to their limit and then they're pushed even farther than that. And so, one thing that reigns true to me or sounds true is that, like, they want, they need people on the back of progression. So, there's, for whatever reason, there seems to be heavy interest in um, progressing rapidly, like new technology, newer and newer, moving faster. And so the reason for that is they want people to work harder and harder. And I know this sounds a little vague, but I'll connect it all at the end. And so So they want people to work harder and harder for this new technology, and you kind of see that because there's a neglect of doing things perfect, doing things the best that you can in the right way, and there's a more of a shift towards we need it done by this amount of time. Because when you think about it, that's always you always have three factors. You have like time, price, and like how well it's done. So like, say you're building a table, you know, if you want it done well, and if you want it done well, it's going to take more time to build, and it's going to be a higher price. If you want it done fast, it's going to be a lower price, and it's going to take less time to build. So it's kind of like that. You can think about it like that in that triangle. And there's more of the shift between just like getting stuff done. And some people can argue like, oh, it seems like people get lazier in societies that are extremely wealthy. And I think you can argue this, but I don't think it is true for the working class. I think it's true for the executives and the people on top. But I argue that it's almost the opposite for the working class. Because take it from America. And so one thing I learned today is that the minimum wage in South Carolina is $7.25 an hour, which is absolutely insane that that's even a number. And so I did the math on that. And so before taxes, every 2 weeks, if you work 40 hours a week, that's $580. So after taxes are going to be extremely low, but they have to be at least $60 to $80. And so you're netting about $500 every 2 weeks, which is insane. You're netting $1,000 a month, which is absolutely insane as well. And so let's address all the arguments. Number one, if you're living off the income, there's no shot you can even find rent for $1,000, especially where I live. Maybe in some of the poor parts you may be able to, but it's going to be very close. I would argue that the lowest you'll probably find is like 700, maybe 500, but even then you're living in an extremely rough place. And so if your argument then goes to, okay, obviously this is minimum wage, this is not what people are meant to live on. Yeah, you could argue that, but I would say even if you're like a high schooler, I think this is an insanely low price, because even if you're a high schooler and this is just like your money that you spend on yourself, say you don't even save it, say you don't even like need a car or anything, your parents provide that for you. You're working an extremely horrible job. If you're working a minimum wage job, I've worked minimum wage jobs. They're not fun. They're not good. It's definitely not worth what you're getting paid. And so and then there's a ridiculous amount of bureaucracy, it seems, the lower you go. So the lower you go, there's all this emphasis on like work harder, like do it faster, get it done faster, an extremely large amount of bureaucracy. And so because of this, it's like pushing people to work harder and harder and harder. And so I really have been thinking, and I want to figure out why. And I think I have part of the truth, which is like pushing people in the direction of improvement. But it's very confusing what the ultimate goal is. I don't know if it's just like there's a correlated plan at the top to like want to get off this planet, or I don't know, I can't think of it right now, but there seems to be this heavy push for getting people to work harder and harder. And there's like this theme, like this like Geist, like I don't know what you would call it, of like and it seems to be persistent of like having people work extremely hard and like pushing like no time. And then last point I would add is you also see this when things get harder economically, when things get more difficult economically, which is like you look at the US, you look at Japan, the money is basically worthless. Like all the numbers are skewed for inflation, so like if you're getting raises, you're never beating inflation. You're getting poorer and poorer over time. And so then as you get poorer and poorer over time, you're forced to work harder to just maintain. And so that also plays into it as well. But I feel like this is like a correlated plan that has already been built out to make people work extremely hard. But I really want to know what that is.